During a stage play, one of the actors suddenly collapses on stage. Jeevan quickly rushes in to help, and with the assistance of a doctor, they try to save the man, Arthur. Sadly, their efforts fail, and Arthur doesn't survive. As the police arrive to take away the body, Jeevan notices a young girl, Kirsten, who just witnessed the traumatic event. He gently approaches her to check if she's okay. Jeevan helps Kirsten find Tanya, the woman responsible for watching over the children in the troupe. After making sure she's safe, Jeevan heads to catch his train home. On the way, he sees Kirsten walking alone and decides to accompany her, worried about what could happen to a child traveling by herself. While on the train, Jeevan receives a call from his sister, Shah. She informs him that a teenage patient from Moscow has been admitted to her hospital showing unusual flu symptoms. This isn't a typical virus. It's spreading fast, and the medical team is completely overwhelmed. Shah urges Jeevan to get somewhere safe before the city descends into chaos. When the train stops at the next station, Jeevan gets off in a panic. Kirsten, sensing his distress, follows him. Eventually, Jeevan calms down and agrees to walk her home. But when they reach her house, Kirsten discovers her parents aren't there, and she can't get inside. Concerned, Jeevan decides to take her with him. But first, they stop at a store, where he buys a large supply of food. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Shah starts showing symptoms of the virus herself. She keeps working despite knowing she's already infected, doing what she can as waves of people flood into the ER desperate for help. Back with Jeevan and Kirsten, she starts to sense something is wrong. When he tries to convince her to come with him, she resists, so he lies, saying he spoke with her parents and that they'll pick her up in the morning. She believes him and helps push the shopping carts full of supplies. They eventually arrive at Frank's apartment, Jeevan's brother. From the window, Kirsten witnesses a terrifying sight. An airplane crashes nearby, shaking the entire building. The explosion confirms everything Jeevan had said. This is real, and the world is spiraling out of control. Frank, now convinced as well, agrees to let them stay and take shelter. 80 days later, when the food finally runs out, Frank and Kirsten are forced to leave the apartment. Outside, they find the entire city blanketed in snow. When Kirsten was only 8, she tried calling her parents after finally recharging her phone. But there was no answer. 3 days later, she received a message informing her that the phone's owner had died and their body was in the hospital morgue. A warning followed. The hospital was contaminated. Elsewhere, Miranda receives a call from her boss, Lan, during a business trip. He orders her to return to Chicago immediately, warning that a deadly pathogen is spreading fast. She has just 7 hours before the outbreak takes over Malaysia. Miranda searches online for any mention of the virus, but finds nothing. Lan reveals that the government is censoring information to prevent panic. The only way out, he says, is a ship anchored 16 kilometers off the coast. At her hotel, she picks up a package, left by Lan's associate, which contains a photo of the ship and a cabin key. On her way to the dock, Miranda takes a bus. She's startled when she notices a sick woman coughing near her and gets off in a hurry. Just then, Lan calls again to tell her something devastating. Arthur, her ex-boyfriend, has died. Distraught, she fumbles and drops the key to her cabin. Now unsure of what to do, Miranda returns to the hotel, determined to attend her business meeting. But during the presentation, she breaks down, grieving for the only man she ever truly loved. After leaving the meeting with a colleague named Jim, she confesses that the world is ending. Jim begins to cry, unready to face the apocalypse. Back in her room, Miranda calls Lan to say goodbye. She realizes from his voice he's coughing, that he's infected too. But she doesn't want him to worry, so she lies, telling him she's safely aboard the ship. She ends a call with a final goodbye and begins sealing the air vents with duct tape, ready to face whatever comes. 2 years pass. Kirsten now travels alone until she meets Sarah, a former musician. She explains that Frank and Jeevan didn't survive. 20 years later, Kirsten, now grown, travels with Sarah and a group of artists who live like nomads. They perform in towns across a post-apocalyptic world where survival is uncertain and strangers can be dangerous. One day, the group stops at a campsite. A man named Brian appears, clearly not welcome, but he tries to blend in. He says he's excited for their next performance and invites them to visit the Museum of Civilization, a place that preserves memories of life before the collapse. Sarah declines. Brian leaves behind an old record from her former band and promises to invite them again when they pass through Neo Santiago. Later that day, the group splits up. One half heads toward Pink Tree to visit old friends, only to be stopped at the edge of a minefield. A man named Gil rushes out and warns them not to take another step. Panic sets in when Sarah realizes she's let her troupe into a trap. Gil and Katrina, the couple living there, explain they set the mines after a man known as the Prophet invaded their home the previous summer and took their children. When asked what happened, Gil reveals the prophet came with a teenage boy and used crutches. They took him in, fed him, and treated him kindly. But that night, the prophet told the children a story around the campfire and convinced them to leave with him. That night, Kirsten reads a book titled Station 11, given to her by Arthur. Only 5 copies were ever printed. The book, written and illustrated by Miranda, is now Kirsten's most treasured possession. Looking out the window later, Kirsten sees her young friend Alex, leaving on horseback. She realizes the girl has gone after the prophet. Brian returns, once again trying to convince the group to follow him. But this time he's not alone, and both he and his companion are armed. Sarah realizes they have no choice and reluctantly agrees. The group sets off toward the Museum of Civilization. After several hours trekking through the forest, Kirsten arrives at a lake, surrounded by dozens of children, the prophet's followers. But instead of attacking her, the kids follow her to Tyler's hideout. The moment she sees him, Kirsten attacks. Just as she's about to kill him, Tyler begs for her help. He reveals that her friends are being held prisoner in the museum and that he needs to retrieve something locked inside. Desperate to get her symphony back, Kirsten agrees to go with him, on the condition that he leaves them unharmed. Meanwhile, Sarah and the rest of the troupe finally reunite with the other half of their group at the museum. As Kirsten and Tyler travel through the woods, a hunter ambushes them with darts. Kirsten pushes Tyler down a ravine to protect him, then charges at the attackers. She manages to defeat them all, but during the fight, she's struck by poison darts. As the venom spreads, she begins to hallucinate, seeing a vision of her younger self holding the antidote. She follows the vision through a floating door in the middle of the forest. Suddenly, she finds herself back in Frank's apartment. Jeevan is there. 3 months after the outbreak began, Jeevan had tried to leave their home in search of food. Before exiting, he broke into a neighboring apartment and found signs that its previous occupant had jumped from the window. Jeevan returned with a radio and learned that civilization had collapsed. Though he wanted to leave, he stayed one more night to let Kirsten perform a play based on Station 11. During the performance, an armed man broke in. Frank told Kirsten to hide while Jeevan tried to reason with the intruder. The man demanded they leave, but Frank refused and was stabbed. Jeevan managed to kill the attacker, but it was too late. Frank was dying. Kirsten, blaming herself for convincing them to stay that extra day, never forgave herself. Now, as her vision ends, Kirsten says goodbye to Frank one last time before taking the antidote. She wakes up hours later, lying near a river. Tyler tells her she was unconscious for 3 days and that he carried her the entire way. As she recovers, the two are discovered by Miles. They introduce themselves as members of the Traveling Symphony. Miles brings them to the Museum of Civilization. Inside, Clark, now a key figure at the museum, questions them. Tyler hides his identity and plants a bomb in the tower. While Kirsten distracts Clark with her acting, she sneaks away and finds the rest of her group. She's overjoyed to reunite with them. Dieter informs her that Sarah suffered a heart attack and is in the museum's medical ward. Kirsten suspects Sarah is being held prisoner and begins planning a rescue. Meanwhile, Miles suspects the truth and takes Elizabeth to meet the prophet. Though he believes it's Tyler, Elizabeth refuses to accept it. That night, Tyler helps Kirsten reach Sarah. Kirsten sees that her friend is too weak to travel and heartbroken, prepares to say goodbye. Sarah asks her to keep her illness a secret until the play is over. Later, Kirsten meets with Tyler again. Together, they escape through a hidden tunnel and spend the night in the ruins of the old airplane Tyler once set on fire as a child. There, he finally opens up. He tells her he's Arthur and Elizabeth's son. Kirsten is stunned. She was close to Arthur, and the two bond over their shared pasts. Tyler explains how he was traumatized after witnessing the execution of an innocent man and never forgave those who locked him and his mother away. When he says he won't return to the museum, Kirsten leaves alone, determined to protect her friends. As she walks away, Elizabeth appears. She embraces Tyler, finally recognizing her son. Back at the museum, an explosion rocks the structure, Tyler's bomb. Clark watches helplessly as the building he spent 20 years creating burns. Elizabeth calls Jeevan for help. Now a respected doctor, he rushes to the museum. He stays near Sarah in her final moments. Meanwhile, Tyler, now a prisoner, gets a visit from Kirsten. As the troupe prepares for their next play, she gives him the Hamlet script and tells him he'll be playing the lead. Elizabeth joins the production as Gertrude. That night, they perform. The play is powerful and moving. After the curtain call, Elizabeth approaches Tyler. He apologizes for running away. She forgives him, admitting she would have followed him if only he had asked. They embrace, finally reunited after years of pain. Word of Sarah's passing spreads. The symphony holds a choir in her honor. As Kirsten watches, she spots someone in the crowd. It's Jeevan. They run to each other, tears flowing. After all these years, they still carry deep love and gratitude for the time they shared. The next morning, the symphony prepares to leave the museum. Alex, now ready to walk her own path, says goodbye to Kirsten. Elizabeth also leaves with Tyler and the orphan children who follow him. Brian, too, is invited to join the symphony. Before parting ways, Kirsten learns that Jeevan has a family now. He's married with children. She's happy for him, knowing how much he once longed for that life. They hug tightly. She thanks him for saving her all those years ago, knowing she wouldn't be alive if not for him. As they walk away, they promise to reunite at the airport next year, this time with no regrets and with new stories to tell. So that's it. Hope you enjoy the story. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more videos.